Well, good evening. I'm Alan Jackson. Welcome back to Nashville. It's said that the first step toward fixing a problem is recognizing that you have one. Well, it appears that the majority of the country does truly recognize that there are things that need to be fixed. The new team in Washington is plowing ahead full steam and hopefully in time to keep the country from getting into more trouble, especially with our economy. There are headlines every day about the federal debt, which is as big as the budget of our military. That simply cannot continue. And the vast amount of fraud from government programs, more than $500 billion worth, all from people who are stealing from the taxes that we pay. That has to be addressed. And the countries we compete with, taking advantage of our open markets, making it impossible to compete and keep American jobs here at home. Well, the expensive new economy put a dent in every family's budget, to the point where more debt than ever has piled up on our credit cards. But there's hope. When the president delivered his address to the country, the polls showed that support for his ideas is growing. They may not all be wearing the red MAGA hats, but they genuinely support making America great again. Now parts of the country are already more safe. It only took a few weeks, but thousands of people who were trying to come here illegally have almost all turned back, with the understanding that they're still welcome, but only if they come here legally.
Within hours of taking the oath of office, I declared a national emergency on our southern border, and I deployed the U.S. military and Border Patrol to repel the invasion of our country. And what a job they've done. As a result, illegal border crossings last month were by far the lowest ever recorded, ever.
Well, there's much to digest and a tough road ahead for the president. His determination was on full display when he went to the Capitol to address the nation. Joining us tonight is the Dean of Pepperdine School of Public Policy, Pete Peterson. Welcome back, Pete.
Great to be back with you, Alan.
The recent polling data shows a strong desire for change. 70% believe the country has been on the wrong track, and 80% advocate substantial change. But so much is happening at once that I'm not sure that most people are able to process it all. What are you seeing?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And I think it's also been exacerbated by the fact that the previous administration had moved at such a slow pace on a variety of different issues. Obviously, that in many ways led to President Trump's reelection, but also this general feeling that a lot of things were broken in the country and it was on the wrong track. And so when you look especially at his address to Congress this week, you see across a whole array of issues, both domestic and foreign, that President Trump has brought new life and certainly an array of new policy decisions to Washington, D.C. And this really is, and he often says that this is what the American people voted for back in November. But you're also right to say that it's a dizzying speed that he's going at.
Well, one thing that's changed a lot is the messaging. People are hearing the outrageous stories of how their taxes have been wasted. And I think it's leading to an even greater majority of supporters for government overhaul. You know, we've known about the $400 hammer for years, but the long, expensive list of how our government has been handing out the money we pay in taxes is pretty shocking. What sort of impact do you see as people share the stories of waste with one another?
I think, again, it springs out of that general American awareness that there is a lot of what we call waste, fraud, and abuse, especially in our federal government. And I think one of the more powerful parts of the president's speech this week was when he just went line by line. And of course, I'm sure he was only listing a fraction of what DOJ and other Trump administration officials are finding, but it really is a laundry list of misspending of tax dollars. And Americans are right to be not only concerned, but angry about hearing about the lack of accountability that we've seen in the federal government and their spending of tax dollars. But transparency is coming to federal spending, and it's certainly something that Americans across the political spectrum support.
Well, for this next question, I'd like to ask everyone to think of your pay stub. You know, the one that shows your total income minus the federal and state taxes on it, the deductions for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Compare the amount you deposit in the bank each pay period versus the original amount your employer pays you. That difference is what we all hand over to spend, mostly on things we never hear about, including the transsexual coloring books, Sesame Street show in foreign countries. Pete, I believe that what Trump and Elon Musk have done is a huge change, letting taxpayers know how badly they've been taken advantage of so they can help do something about it. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I'm hearing the same thing. It's especially true out here in California, where for especially these last few years, we've seen this break in what was been called the blue state model. Out here in California, it was said that, yeah, you're going to pay high taxes, but you're going to get a lot back in services. You're going to get great schools and great roads and great public safety. Well, we're not seeing any of those things, even as we're still paying high taxes out here. I think at the federal level, you're also seeing that same thing, that Americans understand, just like you said, Alan, when you look at your pay stub, you see a big chunk of that going to the federal government and also state and local governments. But you're really left to wonder, how is this money being spent? Because I'm not seeing it in quality public services that are coming back to me. And I think in the end, really what we want to do is rebuild trust in our governing institutions. And I think that's what a lot of people miss about President Trump and DOJ and some of these other efforts at creating more transparency. It is not just about taking government apart. It's about rebuilding trust in institutions that frankly have lost it in the eyes of the American people.
Well, if it weren't so personal, it'd be fascinating to watch this public debate. But the Democrats don't seem to want to give an inch from what I've seen. They have no leaders to turn to, and they don't appear to have an agenda either. Even your governor in California has come up empty-handed, so he's adding a podcast to his schedule if just talking about things publicly will make him seem more engaged. Can that party regroup, or have the Republicans seized the entire agenda for now?
Well, you're certainly right to say that a lot of Californians, and even across the spectrum in this deep blue state, are really wondering why our governor is spending any time on anything other than rebuilding from the fires and making our public services like education and roads and public safety work better. Now, at the federal level, you're absolutely right to say that really the Republicans, especially under President Trump, have really been driving the narrative, as they say. And if there's a superpower that President Trump has, it is forcing his opponents to defend the indefensible. And in an array of different things, whether it's getting the Democratic legislators out in front of the Department of Education to defend that, or in other spending policies, where President Trump is seen as really defending the taxpayer, Democrats are being seen as defending the bureaucracy. And that's a losing battle politically.
We'll hear more from the Dean at Pepperdine when we come back. You've got a couple of minutes now to send me an email about this discussion we can address later in the show. We love you sharing your thoughts with the larger audience here. You can send them to comments at alanjacksonnow.com. We'll be right back. We're back now with Pete Peterson, our wise man from the other side of the country. Let's start with the president's tariffs. I don't think most people understand what tariffs are designed to accomplish. For example, the Canadian government subsidizes its lumber industry. Most of the timber they sell here comes from government-owned forest. But in our country, the privately run timber industry gets no such government help. The result is the Canadian timber is much less expensive than what's harvested here, and American companies can't offer the same lower prices. So by adding a tariff on Canadian lumber, American companies will have a much better chance of competing. But even when the president is trying to help American businesses survive, the Democrats are pushing back. Listen to this comment.
His tariffs on allies like Canada will raise prices on energy, lumber, and cars, and start a trade war that will hurt manufacturing and farmers. Your premiums and prescriptions will cost more because the math on his proposals doesn't work without going after your health care.
And of course, she said nothing about the damage to American businesses or the jobs that are lost. But I don't know of anyone who would volunteer to lose their job here to help support a government-sponsored business in another country. What do you think about all that, Pete?
Alan, I think you perfectly framed the strategic importance that President Trump places on tariffs. Now, I would say I think he could be clearer at outlining the reasons for doing this. The fact is that we are out of balance with our trading partners, like, for example, Canada, who are doing things in some ways like a reverse tariff by subsidizing a variety of different industries, putting them at putting our timber industries, as one example, at a disadvantage. And so really what President Trump is seeking is balanced and fair and free trade. But there's going to be some pain along the way to get there. And I do think that President Trump could be a little bit clearer about stating the real intentions of this, which is to ensure free and fair markets. And we currently do not have those, even with those we consider friends like Canada.
What about trying to level the playing field with tariffs on Mexican products? You know, one example of the disparity there involves the automakers who've moved their plants to Mexico because the labor costs are a lot cheaper. Cheaper labor means a less expensive vehicle and more sales. Mexican workers make between $5 and $14 an hour versus the U.S. auto workers who average $32 an hour, more than twice as much. Don't you think that most people support the president in his determination to strengthen American business?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this goes to this whole America First view on American policy, both domestic and international. And like you said, there are a variety of places in our trade agreements with other countries that really have not been fair to American workers in a lot of different ways. And so in this, you bring up another one with the automakers in Mexico, trying to balance the playing field. Again, another phrase that you use that I think is the right way to communicate this. I think what's been confusing, I've heard from Commerce Secretary Lutnick, who one day we're talking about tariffs as a way of fighting fentanyl coming across the border. In other ways, we've been trying to look at other issues having to do with illegal immigration. If we just keep the messaging on point, which is being fair to American workers, I really think that's the consistent winning message for a tariff policy.
Well, we can't really have this discussion without including China, where tariffs may be needed as much as any country. Their steel and aluminum production are heavily subsidized by the Chinese government, and they flood the global markets with cheaper products. But even with tariffs, I'm wondering if there's any way to compete with China when their average worker is paid only about $6.50 an hour.
Yeah, another difficult situation. I think what's complicated there with China is obviously they are a geopolitical really foe to the United States. And so a lot of what they're deriving benefit from economically is going directly into things like their military. So making sure that we're being very clear with them as it regards to trade policy and development, economic development, also understanding that in a lot of different ways, intellectual property or IP, that is one of the countries that has really run afoul of international regulations, not just American ones, as it relates to intellectual property. China is a unique case and does need to be treated uniquely, but I do see that President Trump is up for defending not only American workers, but in the case of China, American geopolitical interests as it relates to China.
Pete, you always bring clarity to the turbulent change that we're walking through. Thank you for taking the time today.
Always great to be with you, Alan.
When we come back, it's a special moment for a young man, a very powerful reason for hope. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the part of the program where I usually share my thoughts about the times we're in. But tonight, I'd like to share something we witnessed on the night of the President's address to Congress. It's a lesson in how we should all value our children.
Joining us in the gallery tonight is a young man who truly loves our police. His name is DJ Daniel. He is 13 years old, and he has always dreamed of becoming a police officer. But in 2018, DJ was diagnosed with brain cancer. The doctors gave him 5 months at most to live. That was more than 6 years ago. Since that time, DJ and his dad have been on a quest to make his dream come true, and DJ has been sworn in as an honorary law enforcement officer, actually a number of times. The police love him, the police departments love him. And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
I'll be back with your emails in a moment. You might even hear your name this time. I want to thank you again for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. Your opinions and perspectives, they're important. Kay Webb in Pennsylvania wrote, "When I read this quote today, I had to share with you because your AJ Now tagline, 'More reasons for hope than despair,' popped into my head. Obviously, another well-known person would agree with your wisdom. And I quote, 'There's no greater folly in the world than for a man to despair,' end quote. That's Miguel de Cervantes from Don Quixote. I'm in good company. His English is better than mine." Dixie from Wichita Falls, Texas emailed, "Your program is so refreshing, and to know that we hear truth from you about the times we're living in. I'm wondering about the countries and corporations that are investing all these billions into our nation. For instance, Apple with $500 billion, and from Saudi Arabia, $600 billion. Do you believe these investments are really to benefit America, or at some point could this turn out to be an invasion? I'd like to know your point of view on this. Thank you." Well, Dixie, the way I understand it is they're investing in manufacturing in our nation, investing in manufacturing facilities, infrastructure, giving jobs to Americans. I don't see that as a hostile takeover. They're not buying farmland or the land around our military bases, as has been happening in some previous administrations. I believe they're making an investment in American manufacturing, which gives us a shared future together. Now, having said that, we're responsible for our culture. That's not the government's job. At Main Street in every small town in America, we have to give attention to the values that we're teaching our children in our schools, in our homes, in our communities, in the universities that we have locally. If we'll do that, I think the future's bright. Minnie Hawkins wrote, "It's a shame that private industry has a higher standard and work ethic than those hired to serve the people. The Bible states that a worker is worthy of his hire. I say to all the federal workers, get to your offices and get to work." Minnie, from your lips to God's ears and hopefully to the workers' hearts. That'll be an improvement for all of us. Mary Jean emailed, "I have enjoyed and gained wisdom from listening to your live stream services, podcast, Alan Jackson Now, and daily posts on email. Also, the 9:30 a.m. Central Time programs on TBN. You offer a very godly perspective and biblical knowledge." Mary Jean, that sounds like all Alan all the time. May God help you. If you missed this broadcast, though, you can go to YouTube every evening. It's posted there. The address is on the screen behind me. If you haven't yet, take a moment to send your email to comments@alanjacksonnow.com. Your feedback and your questions, they do a lot to shape our show. Well, I'm Alan Jackson, and I pray you have a wonderful evening.